My name's Dan Klaussen. I was the product manager for the original part of the PBS mobile strategy. So PBS, how many years ago was it now? Four-ish? Four. Yeah, four.
4 years.
Started a mobile project to say, look, we've got video. We have a lot of video. We have a lot of viewers. It's really interesting that we could get some of these viewers to see our video wherever they happen to be. And so I started a project with them trying to figure out exactly what that would mean. I handed that project off to Jeff. Jeff then grew that project considerably from my handoff and handed it over to Matt McManus, and Matt took it the rest of the way, and is currently there now and providing the current solutions that are out there. So we started with just an idea to the point now that we have video streaming over a very large number of different devices. Matt, how many videos are streaming these days? What's some numbers?
Well, we just reached over 1 million streams just on our latest product launch, which was the Apple TV. So that was, we got to there in I think about 20 days. So
about 20 days to get 1 million streams just on Apple TV alone. Yeah. What kind of volume are you doing on a daily basis or weekly basis, if you have any idea?
It's roughly about a couple 100,000 a day on the web, and then it really varies by product, but close to probably 500,000.
500,000 a day. Okay, so these are some of the largest number of video streams from any of the different platforms that are available. There are very few platforms that are putting out this kind of quantity and volume of video, and the number of assets that are under management is really astronomically enormous. Okay, those are that's the same word twice. All right, so we're probably gonna fight a little bit here as we go through this. We also want to make this interactive. This audience is not that large. It's not that big of a group. So we would like you guys to participate as you'd like to. We can answer questions in the business realms, business strategy, business issues that came up around video, monetization. We can also answer technical questions, and we actually have one of the technical architects in the room with us who's fact-checking anything that we say, but we can also get anything answered that you might have on the fact-checking area. So if there are questions, do feel free to raise your hand and go ahead and ask. So I'll start with a little bit of the beginning of the story. So PBS came to me and brought us in as a product management group. They didn't have any product managers at the time. I was the first one to use the role product manager there. And the person that brought me in, John Brenzel, really actually understood the role of product management, having been at AOL for a number of years. And he gave me complete license to be a product manager. And what that meant was, to me, it was, I need to build a business. I'm the CEO of a business inside of PBS, and it's my job to make it successful. And the minute that I started designing out what it would be to take the PBS content mobile, I realized that we had a strategy, a serious strategy problem within the organization. Two things hit me like a brick. Number one, there was channel conflict within the organization. There's already people that are responsible for video, web video, and digital video at PBS, and anything that was going to be going over mobile was a threat to that group. The second one was there was a legal department that said that you don't actually have the rights to do any of the things that you're about to try to do. Yeah, right? So what are you going to do about that? So taking on the role of a product manager, you really have to own your project from the top to the bottom. There is no department that is not going to try to either block you or help you, depending on where their position is, and you need to work through them. So the first thing doing, working with PBS as an organization is really crazy because of all the number of member stations and how the economics works there. So the first thing I had to do was come up with a strategy that would make sense, that would actually fly within the organization. And they already had a license to stream video over the internet using TCP/IP streaming to a web device. And the web device was using these old, crappy encoded videos. Sorry, Drew, but they were pretty crappily encoded videos. To do this kind of flash player or slightly better than flash player quality video in a little window. And I'm trying to put this out on an iPhone, on an iPad, in high resolution, in high quality, and it was just not going to work out very well. So the first thing we had to do was re-encode all the video. But I had to go to the legal department and get them to try to understand something really, really important. And this was a fundamental aspect of being a great product manager at a company. You have to go in there and look at where the most important, most critical piece that's going to block your project and find a way to twist it and do the jiu-jitsu move and turn this into an advantage. Well, it turns out that if you stream video to an iPad or an iPhone, There is no technical difference between TCP/IP streaming to an iPad or an iPhone as there is to a laptop, except in the minds of all the producers and all of the people who had the content rights. So we had to make sure that the legal documents, all of the write-ups of what does it mean to do TCP/IP streaming to various devices would actually cover this idea that said, I can play this on my mobile devices just like I can play it on my laptop. Technically, this phone is a small computer. It is not a mobile device. It is a small computer that happens to be getting a mobile connection. And having to go through and legally push that through all of the different documentation, update all of the different contracts, all the new contracts had to contain that. That's not an easy thing to do. And as a product manager there, I was a consultant. So sitting in a legal department meeting, telling them that their documents needed to be updated as a third-party consultant really wasn't going over very well. But they did embrace it. They did figure it out. They did realize that this was really what the goal was, and we were able to get to our first set of videos that were able to be delivered over the net. I have some great screens of early stages of what it meant to try to go through the design process for that. If you want to see those, you can ask for those. You can clap your hands. You can say, yes, that's part of what I want to see. But let me pass a little bit over to Matt and, to Jeff and to Matt. So I was able to, so my part of the story was going from a concept of what is the goal of trying to get video out there. It's to get video to every possible viewer we can and every device that they want to get to. Sell that within the organization and knock down all the legal barriers, all of the challenges of the encoding, the original mechanisms of the data, and get a product that was out there that would start to work. What I did was tipped off a hornet's nest of legal problems, challenges, and fights within the organization. But that's okay. I handed that off to somebody else.
Yeah, right. Well, I think is this on?
Yeah.
So yeah,
You're not mic'd up.
I'm not mic'd up.
Keep talking. Just keep talking.
Yeah, that's fine.
There you go.
So I was in the middle of a sandwich. So Dan really did that baton handoff. He stirred the hornet's nest. There was a lot of great early wins. I mean, it was a little bit more than a proof of concept, but it was great. We had this iPad app out. It was a few months after the iPad had actually launched. So there was a lot of good opportunity just to capture a lot of interesting new audience that was, I think, additive to the overall PBS audience, which was a mix of everyone. You know, folks that had been on pbs.org, consuming video for a couple years, and said they got that together. And of course, folks in general consuming public media over their antenna on their TV via cable or whatnot. So the interesting problem we had, so we had the iPad app, I think it was in October of 2010, then launched the iPhone in January of 2011.
When I
serves me.
When I left, we had 40% of all video being consumed at PBS was being consumed on mobile devices when I handed it over to you, Jeff.
Oh, right. You setting me up for something? So it was great. So we had this great bounce from, we had a couple of product launches that we got some great marketing love from Apple on. We are top 10 in the App Store for entertainment. For those few months, got that great bump. So we're getting a lot of actually new incremental audience to PBS content that had never been there before.
Learning to work the Apple Store is a really important part of the equation. Being featured as an app and being featured in the App of the Week was an active challenge for us that we succeeded in doing.
Yeah, so we were, it was great. And I think you came a few months later and, hey.
Hey, sorry to interrupt.
We have our moderator.
No.
This is what happens when you're like a newbie from New York and DC, right? And you don't plan enough for traffic, right? So I'm just going to be here in case you guys need me, but as you can probably see, they are more than well equipped for handling.
All right.
But I'll jump in case you get too into it.
Of course. So we had this big bump. We were out on a couple of hot products, and then we started seeing the settling line. And you were talking about contracts now, without getting into the intricacies of public media and how contracts work. All of those things you were sorting out with legal weren't part of any kind of boilerplate contract. So there's a lot of individual negotiating and kind of hand-holding through this whole process with individual stations and producers, because PBS really were more kind of a Netflix of video than an owner or distributor of video like NBC. So being a product manager, you had to have deep understanding of that. But we also did know that with the limited resources of PBS, that had to be only the start of the story. We couldn't just say that we'll do an iPad app, win an award, and then just let that kind of live out there. That we had to build on that. because we knew anecdotally and from some metrics that we were looking at that people in general were just wanted to consume things over the web. We were in the App Store, right? People were going to the app for games, and again, we got initial love, and then people forgot about the icon. Like that whole story, we all know that. So we knew we needed to have a mobile web presence, and that was one of my main ways of. And to that end as well, we weren't on Android, we weren't on Windows Phone. We had to have a good play to get out on devices because for PBS, it is about reach, right?
So I was the apps guy, and you decided to come in and do mobile web?
Yeah, I'm like, your app thing, that's like, you're for the few elite, right? I wanted to be one for the many. So that was right around the time the whole responsive design kind of buzzword was out there. So I got the bug in my ear, went to a conference. It was the Breaking Development Conference in fall, I think, 2011. I may be getting the timeline a bit off. And really looked at responsive design as could this be a platform and a really great story in a way for PBS to build a web interface that could reach everyone and deliver video to everyone with a web browser. The PBS content on a toaster or refrigerator idea, although I haven't seen the browser installed on a toaster yet.
Oh, yeah.
So I did this big job. I went to a couple conferences, had to kind of understand some of the technical nuances of responsive design in general, just delivering content. Then when I got home, sold the stake, got buy-in internally based on some, hot decks that I pulled back saying, well, this is great. This will be better than sliced bread. We don't need to make a native play on all these platforms. We'll just put it out to the web to everybody and it'll be great. And it turned out, of course, to be a lot harder than that. Because not only did I have to sell my management in PBS that this was the way of the future, this is a way we can leverage our pool of resources for many different distribution channels.
Sound familiar?
Yeah.
Everybody out there is probably in that same evaluation. But wait a minute, if I just do mobile web, it'll work
Right.
for everybody, and it'll be just my web team. It'll solve all my problems.
Well, actually, that's what I was going to ask, if you guys have given like any takeaways just yet in terms of, everything that you've had to go through to be able to bring this to where it is today. Say that, people in the audience are maybe halfway through. What's like the main thing that you could kind of impart a little bit of wisdom to be able to say, well, if you need to be able to either gain consensus or, get some kind of strategy around it internally to be able to drive the vision, what would you say that gave you, I think, the success that you've experienced at PBS? This is really key.
Yeah, and our situation, it's getting a little easier now, but even 2 years ago, doing video on the mobile web in particular was challenging. Dan touched on a lot of that. Doing video in general, video delivery, that was unfortunately tied back. Just being able to do responsive design, deliver web pages to people was like 10% of the problem. So part of that was really, for this particular problem, I have a background in web development. That really helped as a product manager to really understand the domain space. I had to understand a lot of the technical challenges around video over the wire, getting really intimate more than I ever thought I'd want to be intimate with video delivery, understanding HLS video encoding and segmentation of sharded video over the line. I mean, you had to become an expert in all of that to really understand it. And on top of that, which is probably one of the most underestimated pieces of my selling job when I got back, was getting the actual and the delivery team on board. Yeah, I did my hand waving. I went to it was great. I was speaking a little bit, externally a bit on some OPA events and got everyone externally and internally on the management side and the C-suite really excited. But then the last sell I wasn't accounting for was the designers and developers on the team. I had to really, really sell them hard. I mean, a lot of the stuff I was coming back with, again, responsive design was the hot buzzword. I mean, the hot buzzword of the moment now, or back then. And it took months of actually selling them on that this is doable, which was, one of the most unexpected things from my point of view.
Even today, getting your designers and your developers side by side to do a responsive design is really the only way it's going to make it work. Whatever they can draw on a piece of paper does not mean that it can be built and written the way that the designer drew it. The idea that you go from a Photoshop, cut it, and make a web page out of it, long gone.
Yeah, and I was like, banging the drum. They come back, see, Ethan Marcotte's book, this is how you do it. There's some of the write-ups on what they did at the Boston Globe at the time. That was the example of responsive design. And, there it was all about culture, right? Everyone's job basically got disrupted. So I was coming in not only with a new kind of technology stack, a new way to distribute, a new way just to design in the aesthetic. It was also culturally, everyone's job description blew up. So I was in there, and I...
So is this just a failure? We're going to get to Matt, too. So we got.
That's a good point. It was, it took, the goal was to get it out in 6 months, and it took 9 months to about a year to get that actual first MVP out the door to get actual feedback.
You put that on your resume?
No. So this is a good handout. So a lot of, and of course,
Talk
we're
about
doing this all
your
the time.
hybrid app
Yeah.
strategy before you hand it off to me.
Yeah, right. So the other apps, so then during that whole time, we had the iPad and iPhone app, which needed care and feeding. So, the also thing is PBS is everyone was a shared resource. So we're trying to do this new thing, but we also had to carve out time to do native iOS development. And with video, everything was, the technology was maturing month over month. So while we're trying to focus on this entirely new kind of web stack, we were constantly being pulled back from legal issues to, weird video delivery problems on our two iOS apps. So focus was a challenge.
There's a back-end team that's doing a lot of work in this time, and things like, do you display everything that you have available to everybody? Do you do a trailing 5? Like, you can have the last 5 episodes or the last 3 episodes. It's catch-up TV. Oh, if you missed it, you can go get it on the web, but if you wait a week or 2 weeks too long, then you can't get it. Stuff will expire. There's long-tail video that PBS that's wildly popular. Every time there's a tsunami, all of a sudden, all these videos suddenly become extremely, extremely popular, and it just swamps the system. Tornadoes, all kinds of things that PBS has. Black History Month. Crazy videos suddenly will spike within the PBS ecosystem, having to be able to handle that. But then the economic model and the financial model and the legal model about what can we get to was playing out this whole time. And then we're going to try to get to lots of other platforms as well.
Yeah, so enough about that. So, the real exciting stuff before I left was we started talking to Apple. We got an Xbox project off the ground of realizing, look, the web isn't the end, because we saw early data, this was in 2012, of people consuming video over all of these gaming platforms, over the top television. We saw this is we can't just do responsive design, because a lot of the browsers on the Xbox platform couldn't do video. Do basic video browsing, but we had to have a presence there. If ubiquity and distribution to all was our goal, we had to be there as well, and that's where I kind of hand that off to Matt midstream.
So what are the different platforms that it supports now?
Let's see. Well, everywhere with a web browser. So, it'll take me forever to list all those. Then we have our iOS apps, Roku, Xbox, Apple TV, and soon to be a few others. But the problems that I had to solve were a bit different. Jeff hired me, and the 2 KPIs I was really trying to drive up were, total number of video streams across all the platforms, of which these 2 guys had already tackled most of the obvious ones at that point. So that's how we were able to get those, OTT, quote-unquote, platforms off the ground. In the past month, we had 26% of our total streams came from either the Apple TV, Xbox, or Roku. And, when I got there, that was 0. So we are getting a net new audience. It's a much more loyal audience. But the other interesting KPI we had was we had no source of user authentication, and sort of one of our big business goals is helping to drive membership to your local PBS station, so then they could pay us, and then we can pay producers to produce the content, and the wheel goes round and round. So one of the other big things that Jeff and I worked on briefly together was rolling out social sign-on, and then how to get that to those new over-the-top platforms. So we ended up going in a bit of a way a la HBO Go or ESPN or any of those sort of activate your device. But for us, you don't have to go through a cable subscription. You just essentially sign in with an account, and it's a way to get personalized features to those over-the-top devices. So those are really the 2 big KPIs I've been trying to drive up. As you can see, my problems I was trying to solve were already, the groundwork and the foundation was laid by Jeff and Dan. All the legal stuff was mostly out of the way. Well, that's not true, but a lot of it was out of the way.
You solved that channel conflict problem, right?
No. Well, now that those things are connected to your TV, it's seen, by some as an attack on the normal broadcast business, even though, again, it's really just something that's connected to the internet.
Matt, what would you say, or have you been able to see or obtain feedback from the users? If you talk about being able to kind of create social sign-in, et cetera, do you, at least from your point of view in the department, get to actually see somebody say, well, I'm really glad it is this way versus that way, or whatever, when you're thinking about, OTT, which is just getting bigger and bigger?
Right. Yeah, I think We got some negative feedback at first because we only rolled out with Facebook, Twitter, and Google+.
Okay.
And a lot of our audience, and for the younger audience, that was good, but we got some scathing emails, hate the man collecting all the data, et cetera. So we then built our own sort of open ID provider called PBS Account, which essentially functions the exact same way as those. So it's been really an ongoing experiment. We realized we actually weren't getting as much as we wanted with Twitter, so we dropped that as a login service, and everything we've been doing has really just been very experimental, but it has been paying dividends. We have about over 360,000 registered users now, again, which was 0 over a year ago. So.
That's hot.
A quick note on feedback. I built a feedback button into the mobile apps and let people just push a button, type in feedback, didn't collect their name. It was optional, put in your email address. It was amazing how many people did. I got about 35 to 50-ish messages per day with people giving me feedback on the app. I answered every single one myself by hand for 2 years. Well, for a year, the year that it was out. Yep. And it was amazing how we would take that feedback, modify the application, and ship a new version, or sometimes it was an issue on the back end. We had modified something, the geo-blocking was failing in a certain area of Puerto Rico. I was able to get it fixed in a couple of hours. I would email a person back and say, please try it again, I think I fixed that for you. It went viral. It was phenomenal how the feedback loop of somebody saying, feedback, hey, I heard you, it'll be in the next build, or I heard you, I fixed it, try it again. It was nuts. It was, do it. If you ever have a chance to build an app that does that, do it.
I think that's like a great point to add. How do you decide, though? I mean, obviously, if it's something technical, then you have to fix it. But what if it's something like just purely aesthetic, like I'd prefer this on the left or the right? How do you guys ever really decide that? Or are you just like, you know what? I'm the UX god. Like, I'll make it how I want it to be.
There's a fun story there, right, Dan? You want to talk about the navigation? That's a great story. So
and also, too, just to not go over, because I don't know who's our next people, and I was in here all day yesterday, so, monitoring, so I'm really sensitive to that, to make sure.
We started a little late, so we'll only go over by half of what we had to start late by.
Okay.
So I'm sure the story will resonate with a lot of folks, I hope it will. So you can see that, early on in the design of the iPad app, a lot of design patterns for navigation on especially tablet apps had been kind of debated, and you can see there, which actually still exists, right? This are icons and left navigation. So there was, long story short, there was a lot of debate internally between the design, product, executives about.
And Apple telling us that this is not a pattern.
Right.
That you have to follow our patterns.
Right. So it's like, we get these list of icons like on the left, because we're a video watching experience, so we didn't actually have a portrait orientation mode. It was only landscape. There was a lot of heartburn internally about, and the final navigation pattern was actually stolen from or borrowed from the desired pattern, which was to do the play buttons, the video interaction buttons on the video player, not to actually be the global navigation for the entire site.
We do a lot of R&D. That stands for rip off and duplicate.
Right. So even talking about feedback, we had endless debates internally. When I was there product-wise, we had a lot of heartburn over, well, I didn't particularly just anecdotally like this left-hand navigation. They were icons that weren't universal. They didn't have labels. But we didn't seem to get a lot of user feedback or confusion, and it existed out there for so long. A lot of our users just, they got used to the navigation pattern, whether it was good or bad. From a user experience standpoint, it just kind of stood there. So I thought that was an interesting kind of early. You had a.
Well, it's by far the most copied video app out there, and almost every video app now borrows all of their design patterns from what we had done. But the interesting part that Jeff didn't want to say was I had to go toe to toe with the executive VP, and finally it came down to a choice: are we doing the menus across the bottom like an iPhone, or are we going to do them down the side? He just couldn't decide. He said, I've got to go with a pattern that makes the most sense, that Apple's recommending, that's the most understood. And I'm saying, no, you got to break the mold. This is what people want. So finally, I just called him a chicken shit for not being willing to do it. And he said, you know what? You think you're right. Let's go with it. We can always change it later. Best decision he ever made.
If you do say so yourself, right? So do you guys want to turn it over to questions? Would you prefer to each kind of sum up yourselves? How would you like to handle it?
Questions, please.
Okay.
Sorry, did you say 26% of all your video streams are now over the top?
The question is
Could
26, what
everybody
percentage
hear that?
of videos are over the top?
just in the past month. It's a rolling number, so I don't have any next year I'll be able to tell you maybe.
Whether that's sustained or not? Yeah.
Yeah, whether that's sustained.
But it's a huge spike right now. It's staggering how many are actually over the top streams.
Did you do a lot of work getting promoted on Xbox and Roku?
Did we have to do any work to get promoted over the top?
Well, I mean, with Roku, we were partners with them, so yeah, there's a bit of promotion, but there's not a ton of things on that platform, so, it's almost just by being there, you're always promoted. Xbox, what we've noticed is the discovery tail is a lot longer, because on the Xbox dashboard, we got promoted for the first few days, got most of our downloads then, and then we get hidden in sort of the My App section, and it's not like iOS where you go on, you look at the App Store for new apps. People might check once a month or never. So we sort of seen a big drop off. We have a small, consistent, loyal audience, but we're not continuing to get new downloads. And then Apple, it's a completely closed platform, and we didn't know where we were going to be until the day of launch. So.
And generally, aside from app launches, the promotion love usually came with the cycle of the Downton Abbeys, right? The premieres and whenever the airing or windowing schedule was, and we wouldn't see much when we only had our long tail video offering, of course.
And be careful of vanity metrics. Downloads really don't count much, but views, like you said, are much more exciting. Go ahead.
I'm curious as to what all this movement to web and mobile did for financial results for PBS. And how did PBS react over the course of 2 years that you talked about?
Yeah, so it's funny. So after like the initial, monetization in general, but even putting a donate button or some soft solicitation of that, again, we're public media, and the way that we, part of the way that we get funding is through user support, right? Typically by way of stations, although that changed a little bit as I took the baton and then passed the Matt, but it was, it started out first. And the evolution of a lot of the apps and even the mobile web is that we just had to, all of the underwriters for the producers doing their shows, that's where they get some from PBS and get some from underwriters. We just had to figure out technically to get all of those underwriter ads that were in a lot of cases handled in many different systems just to actually play as a pre-roll to our video. Right? That was the first. Just satisfy the underwriters, right, and make sure the donate button is present in our apps as possible, and like that was our focus. And and as long as we didn't cannibalize and they didn't see the needle move down, was acceptable. But as my tenure ended, there was a lot more focus, saying, oh, we're going to be on Xbox. There's 14 million users. We better at least get names of these people's and email address, so then stations can use that as a source for them to market and
Right, and it's hard to tie directly back to the bottom line, because the bottom line we really care about, there's 143 of them, and those are all the station bottom lines. Also, the more successful we are, the CDN costs for streaming all that video sort of get out of control. So, that's why one of the big pushes towards user authentication and allowing each individual station to build a relationship with their users. So we rolled out a feature called auto localization, and that's based on your location, we say, hey, here's the stations in your area. Which one do you affiliate with? Allow people to register, and we're trying to give stations the tools to build the relationship with their users that can ultimately, hopefully, help their bottom line.
Yeah, we started to attempt to build a lifetime value model of a user,
right,
which still I think is a bit of a challenge today to get that kind of whole view, just from a measurement standpoint.
Right, because the KPI is a conversion to a station member, of which that measurement does not live with us at the PBS National Organization. So while we're building that funnel, it's hard to rapidly iterate and optimize that membership funnel when you don't actually control the bottom of the funnel. But we're working on it. We have some ideas.
PBS is in a really interesting position because of its economics are very different than a standard business model. And we really wanted to get live, full-length videos to as many people as possible, to reach as many people as we can, as the experiment to figure out now what do you do with it. And converting them into donors is really what the PBS model does.
Right.
And we really have one of the largest libraries of full-length video that's available over the net.
And we do push the video advertising technologies to their limits, too.
All right, so we are pushing into the next group. So we have to.
I was going to say, just to be
we need
courteous
one or
for
two
our
more
next
questions,
people.
and we could be done.
Well, I think maybe just one more, just so we can be courteous to our next people coming up, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Sure. Have you had any challenges moving to social sign-in versus capturing email?
Have there been any challenges moving to social sign-in versus other techniques?
Well, we have a partner who handles most of the connection with all the social sign-in APIs, so we just sort of maintain that relationship and then leave it up to them to maintain all those other relationships. We've also relied heavily on the OpenID technology, so we've run into a couple hiccups, but it hasn't been crazy. Definitely, given the way the limited resources we have, we couldn't build an entire system ourselves. So it's definitely been a success for us.
And really getting that off the ground, and again, he's really evolved that concept of just the user login in general, right? Is that, well, who does a person associate with their member station? Do they associate with Nova, the actual producer, with PBS, all three? So that identification, it was really hard to kind of get that. We just basically had to throw it out there and just kind of see what resonated. And I think you're probably still getting an understanding. I mean, you have a lot of users, but exactly what they identify with, and exactly what data we use to collect, and then what do we do with that data is.
We have a secret feature, though, which is not very secret. It's really obvious that one of the most passionate things people want to do when they have these is say, I want to start on one device and finish on another. So being able to track that you've watched this episode to this point, but you can watch it from a different device later, that is the trade-off of value that people are willing to then overcome the barrier to saying, yes, I want to log in, I don't care how I do it. I want that feature. And really driving value by feature is really, really important, especially when it comes to trading personal information. Thank you all for your time. We appreciate it. Let's let the next person get up here.